Well, if anyone is in any way offended by the story I'm about to tell, I sincerely apologize. I'm just passing it along to you the way that I received it, with just a small adaptation. Well, I can see that got your attention. I notice a number of you are sitting up a bit straighter and listening just a bit more closely. Some of you who are my age or older, and especially the men, will recognize the name Joe Louis. Shortly after Joe's birth, his father suffered a mental breakdown and died in an institution. His mom remarried a widower, and the family moved north. At age 16, Joe signed up for an amateur boxing tournament, and at the age of 23, he became the youngest man in history to win the world heavyweight title, a title he held for 12 years. Sports writer Bob Considine tells this story about Joe Louis. At one point in his career, Joe bought a 500-acre farm. And one day he decided to ride across on horseback to see his property more closely. During his ride, he came upon a tiny whitewashed cabin in a secluded corner of the farm. He got off his horse and knocked on the door. An elderly white man opened the door and scowled, "What do you want?" Joe tipped his hat and said, "I was just riding by." The old man interrupted him and snarled, "Well, keep riding." "Is something wrong?" Joe asked. "Wrong? Of course something is wrong," snapped the old man. "Some black man has bought this place." Joe looked down at his feet, paused for a few seconds, and then said, "Yes, that's why I'm here. The owner has sent me to tell you that you are welcome to stay here for the rest of your life. He also said that you'll never be bothered and that there won't be any rent." Then Joe tipped his hat, got back on his horse, and rode off, leaving the old man standing there, speechless. This story dramatizes a point that Jesus makes in today's gospel. Good and not so good people will always live side by side in the world, just as the weeds and the wheat growing in the fields Jesus describes. Good and not so good people will always live side by side, even in the church. Jesus' parable reminds us that we should not be disturbed to find weeds growing among the wheat, even in the church. And there are times when the two will clash, as they do in the story of Joe Louis and the old man. I like this story because it models the attitude we should take toward that which is not so good when we clash with it, as Joe did. Instead of blowing up or ordering the old man to leave, Joe responds the way the farmer in today's parable does, with patience, restraint, and understanding. You and I have been invited to become kingdom people. Jesus' teaching to us today makes it clear that accepting that invitation takes time. We move forward slowly, cautiously. We can't always be sure how things will turn out, especially in our spiritual lives, how things are going to go. Give things a chance Even more importantly, give people a chance. They may just turn out to be quite different, better than what they first appear. Remember how Jesus began this parable? The kingdom of heaven is like. Matthew's gospel is the only one to use this phrase. He does so because the Jewish community, which was his primarily audience, would never use the name of God. And so Matthew never begins Jesus' parables with the kingdom of God. Those who have studied Matthew's beginning have suggested that the best translation for this is God's love, because that's what the kingdom of heaven is really all about. This parable is not just about how to tend fields. It is really more about the fact that there are weeds and wheat in all of us. Christ calls us to stop judging who or what is wheat and who or what is weed, and to understand that we are all children of God, and that God's love is unconditional. God takes our weeds, our faults, our imperfections, and fills them with God's grace. If you look through the Gospels, you will never find Jesus condemning the sinner. Rather, he offers forgiveness. And so all we are called to do is to recognize who we truly are and give ourselves back to God as a gift, wheat and weeds and all. The second parable in today's gospel is about a mustard seed. The smallest of all the seeds, the parable tells us, yet it grows to be a big bush, some 10 or 12 feet tall. We often see that as an image of how faith or love can begin small and grow and grow. And all of that is very good. But we really need to take a second look at this parable. You see, those listening to Jesus considered the mustard seed to be an invasive seed. It was the last thing anyone wanted in their field. As Jesus tells the parable, the mustard plant becomes a shelter for birds, and those birds would go out and eat the seeds the farmer had put in his field. No one in their right mind would ever sow a mustard seed in their field. Well, no one, that is, except God. We need to keep in mind that Jesus' parables are always about God's love, and this parable is no exception. This parable is to remind us that God's love is for everyone, even those we might want to reject, those who are on the fringe of our society, those who are broken, outcasts, those who look different from ourselves, act different, think different. God's love reaches the divorced, the gay, the depressed, the homeless, the jobless, the addicted. God's love is for all. No exceptions, no rejections. God's love is freely given, isn't it? It can't be earned or bought. We as kingdom people are to be as open to this incredible gift from God, and in turn to reach out to others with an effort to love them as God does. Finally, the parable about the yeast. In Jesus' day, bread was baked each day for that day. And some of what we might call starter if you make sourdough bread, you know what that is, would be kept aside for leaven in the next day's bread. To begin a starter, you simply added water to flour, and it is through the baker's daily care and nurturing that the natural yeast found in the flour and the bacteria in the baker's hands interact with each other, and the mixture becomes leaven. It is then added in a small portion and kneaded into the bread mixture, the flour, that allows the dough to rise and to come to life, and when baked, become the bread that nourishes us. We carry within us the indwelling spark of the divine. We also carry the yeast, the good seed, and we carry the bacteria, the weeds, and through the nurturing of God's love, we are transformed. Like leaven, God's love is a source of growth and life. It is transformative. It changes us and livens us. It is to be shared and passed on to all whom we touch. So what wisdom do these parables hold for us? It is not hard to see the God of creation in these stories, the God who waits for us to come to full growth, the God who knows that our future holds a day of reckoning, but most of all, the God from whom the present is marked with mercy. Our God so loves the world that when the original gardeners didn't work out, God gave his Son the job of bringing about a new creation. And this Son, even though rejected and seemingly overwhelmed by the evil of those who put him to death, was not conquered by death, but rather raised by the Father to new life. And this Son is now the source of life for all who believe in him. These parables raise some questions for us, don't they? Do we allow people the time to grow by God's grace into goodness? It can be very tempting to want to pull up the weeds and toss them out. Can we trust that the future belongs to God? In the end, God will be there to harvest all that is good. In the meantime, can we focus on the good, on the wheat in our lives and the lives of others, and try to help that to grow? Every time we come together in this place, we do so as people who want to grow as kingdom people, more and more like God, in whose image we have been made. We draw the strength from that, from sharing bread made of wheat. How blessed we are. How fortunate. God bless you.